is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends like the Houston Federation of Teachers. And, you know, Chris Bell, that's the local 2415 AFL-CIO. And we're also brought to you by Stoli Vodka and hopefully someday friends just like you. He hates it when I say that.
You know, but Stoli needs to re-up, right? Don't you think? It's great vodka.
There you go, Stoli.
Come on, Stoli.
Today on the show, we're going to cover Trump's big day at the UN. What a great speech that was. Bill Cosby, remember him? And the Kavanaugh Diaries Part 2. And, of course, we'll finish the show, just like always, with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into it. You know, Donald Trump went to the UN, made a speech. Of course, he was 2 hours late, so the president of Ecuador had to go ahead of him and take his place and make his speech in Donald Trump's place. And when Trump got up there, he said, and this is the quote I want to highlight, we'll talk about, in less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country, to which the entire UN broke out in audible laughter. It was, if you saw it, it was great. And
See, I don't think that's a good thing. I really don't think that's the reaction that you want.
And then Trump said it's true, adding, didn't expect that reaction, but it's okay.
I watched that, and it's just remarkable, one, that those words came out of his mouth.
Right.
And two, that it was kind of after he made the remarks, the laughter built to a crescendo because it had to be translated. And so it's like, as it went
Is
around
that the
room,
reason for the delay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because,
that's fantastic.
The
I did not
translation,
catch
right.
that.
And so that's what made it even more funny, because you had a couple of chuckles and then everybody got the translation.
Translation
It was
came
like,
through, right.
oh, you mean relative to the Emancipation Proclamation and the New Deal and, you know, the
Or
civil rights
anything, or
legislation and
anybody.
voting rights legislation.
People
and,
actually doing things for people.
And now I'm more confused than ever, because they also said that because they were looking to see how other networks were playing it, and Fox News cut off all the laughter.
Of course.
And just yesterday, I heard the three of the White House correspondents, I think they have 6 from the Washington Post, speak at the Trib Fest, which was fantastic, by the way. And they were asked there about Fox News, and they acted like they're legitimate news people, and the editorial side is different, but their news side really does cover news. And I'm like, that doesn't sound exactly like what I've seen when I've watched their newscasts.
Because even the news is selective news and not the whole picture.
It's carefully selected stories about what they're going to cover.
Curated
Right.
for an audience of one.
This speech was clearly written by Stephen Miller. It went directly back to the America First themes, attacked our allies, and then, of course, the only person he said anything nice about was Kim Jong-un. And it was a attacking, a biting speech that went directly at the heart of the UN. It was horrible.
Well, what this says, Chris Tritico, is that the world is going to move on without America.
Right.
They are basically, you know, as you can see with the TPP and us pulling out of that they are moving on without us. They don't make America part of the calculus anymore, and that has consequences like the devaluing of the dollar in the world market. And so I think that this whole America First attitude is going to have consequences, maybe not immediately, but down the road when these countries start to strike trade deals
Without us.
around
us.
And we are left out of that. And the question is, how do we get back into that? And the only way that happens is for a credible candidate to run in 2020, and we get back to some sense of normalcy in this country, because we've swung way to the right, and that's just not acceptable.
I saw Steve Bannon on Politically Incorrect Friday night.
I saw that,
and actually he was for the first
made
time.
sense.
Yeah, he was calm, he was collected, and he actually made sense in the things he was saying about Trump for the first time ever. And he actually said, I don't go on Fox News Channel. I go on shows like yours where I know I'm going to get attacked so that people will listen to what I have to say. And he said, quit paying attention to the Donald Trump that everybody hates and pay attention down the road to what Donald Trump is doing.
That's exactly right.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. No, it's not what Donald Trump is doing. It's what his minions are carrying out underneath Trump's histrionics at the top. And that's the thing that really scares me. There's real policy.
Okay, well, Bannon's saying it's good stuff. That's what I'm asking you.
But that's, no, Trump has, come on. That's real policy going on underneath all the Trump histrionics.
Bannon's argument is, though, that the trade war that he's engaging in with China and our partners is a good thing eventually, and that if you quit paying attention to the tweets and you look at the trade war that he's engaged in, that we're going to win this at the end of the day.
But Chris, what I would say to that, where are the manufacturing jobs? Where are the coal jobs? Where are those jobs that are going to help those little people that Trump promised to help? It's just like the tax cut. In explaining that tax cut, he said he asked for something different, but still, the most of the money went to 83% of the people who are the most richest in the country. So my deal is, you promised manufacturing jobs, and his calculus is that the GEs and all of those companies that manufacture washing machines and all of those things that we need, that's going to come back here. I just haven't seen that yet because that infrastructure, for the most part, is gone. So where is that going to happen? When is it going to happen?
So based on the things that you just said, James Campbell, and you, Tritico, you started out saying that he made sense. I'm trying to figure out what part of that made sense. I mean, I could understand the points that he was trying to make, but I don't think that he's right, and it doesn't seem like you two think he's right either.
Well, I didn't say... I meant Steve Bannon. Actually, his sentences were full and he was coherent.
And he wasn't wearing 7 shirts.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
That we agreed with him.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
That we agreed with him.
Yeah, you did not agree with him,
Yeah.
but his sentences made sense. John Dickerson, who was the former host of Face the Nation, and now he's on This Morning. I forget what is this CBS's This Morning. He interviewed Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He could not get her to criticize Trump in any way, even on the most obvious things on which he should be criticized. So the world's leaders can laugh at Trump at the UN. But at the end of the day, we have the world's biggest economy, and these other countries want to do business with us.
And they still know it.
And so
Right.
they may be willing to sort of in an anonymous kind of way laugh, but they are not ready to, speak their truth to Donald Trump about his policies.
Well, how easy do people think it will be to undo the damage that he's doing? I guess you could rebuild these relationships fairly quickly, but if this goes on for 8 years instead of 4, who knows?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you did it under Obama when he started to rebuild those relationships after Bush. But one of the things that really troubles me about this is this populism is not just germane to the United States. This is spreading across the world. And Fareed Zakaria had a panel of world leaders on his show. He had the president of Mexico, Switzerland, New Zealand, and somewhere else. And in Switzerland, which really surprised me, they passed a law where 3% of the people who are Muslim can't wear a hijab, in that country anymore because people say it's just not enough for y'all to be able to walk around with hijabs on. And in New Zealand, they passed an anti-immigrant legislation to keep, immigrants out of their country. And so this whole anti-immigrant populist bent for the candidate who says everything that the people want is spreading across the world.
But I get that. But Chris Bell's making a good point. I mean, you said,
he made a point.
Obama. You said Obama rebuilt the relationships after Bush, but Bush break down relationships.
There's always been
Yeah,
there's always been
different
some
presidents,
things that
different
people just sort of
relationships.
honored from the White House, and
Right.
and
And while Bush may have had different relationships with our partners, he didn't break them down.
Yeah.
And he didn't attack our partners.
Well, we agree
and
with
so
that.
it wasn't a rebuilding, it was a resetting of partnerships. This is going to have to be a complete redo of our partnerships when a new president comes in. And Chris is making a good point. What happens if he wins re-election? And we can't say that he's not going to win. We can't say
I do
that.
think that I was having this discussion with someone. Maybe it was you, Chris Bell. I
hope it wasn't last night.
Well, it may have been.
I have no recollection.
And just
so
to make
were y'all
perfect,
rapping or barfing?
no, I wasn't doing either. Just to make it clear, we were at the Texas Trib Fest.
Yes.
And
Andy wanted me to play Devil's Triangle,
Texas
and I would not have
Tribune
any of it.
yeah. It's a drinking game, you know.
Yeah.
I think that new president, the world will beat a path back to our door. What I was saying with whomever I was saying it, maybe I had something to drink.
We all had something to drink last night.
I think that the world is upset with Donald Trump. I don't think that the world is upset with the United States of America. Right. And when we talk about broken relationships, the repair that's going to have to be done, I think, is at the State Department, because you have countries with no ambassador, no U.S. representation. And so the literal relationships, personal relationships that happen between our country and other countries just aren't happening. So the president can change. The world leaders will be happy to, have whatever relationship with the president, but you can't overnight.
And we have no representatives to represent our country.
Yeah, you
Right.
can't put that together overnight.
Yeah, that's going to take some time. All right.
But he did praise Kim Jong-il. And that is remarkable to me. He also criticized, he criticized China for interfering in our elections, but he said nothing about
Nothing
Russia.
about Russia. He criticized Germany. He criticized Iran. He criticized everybody I can think of. Everybody he mentioned, he criticized except North Korea.
I thought it was interesting, though, that he took China to task to say that they were interfering in our elections and not bring up Russia in that context as well. So he did a remarkable job, just a great job, terrific, fantastic.
Do you guys hear Chris Bell's stomach rumbling? Yeah.
Oh, God.
Just kidding. Those are my dogs. They're
What's
here.
left America has gone to the dogs.
This is Dog Day at What's Left America.
Let's go.
Okay.
Who let the dogs out? Roo, 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 roo.
Let's try to move on. Let's go. Bill Cosby, remember him? America's dad was sentenced last week to 3 to 10 years in prison. He ushered in the Me Too movement all by himself, and his sentence was, in my view, it was the most awaited criminal sentence in America for months and months and months. And then this Brett Kavanaugh thing came up, and it came and went last week. And literally, if you weren't a criminal law practitioner like me, you probably didn't even know what happened. It just, boom, it was gone.
Oh, Chris, can I say this on the air? I've always wanted to say this. Hey. But hey, look,
I would never say that on the air.
Okay. So, but you're right. Finish making your point.
That was it. We waited and waited and waited for this, and this would have dominated the news for 2 days, maybe 3 days. It came and went, and it was over, and we didn't even know about
But
it.
it's still one of the saddest chapters
Yeah.
in American history. Here's a guy that all of us grew up listening to his albums. I remember it was one of the first albums I ever owned. It was hilariously funny. We grew up watching his cartoons on Saturday morning. Then later in life, he has the most popular television show on the air, huge crossover appeal, and all the time living this very seedy second life, and then finally being taken to task. And seeing those scenes of him being let out of the courtroom in handcuffs with that cane, just an absolute broken man. It really tells you or shows you how far the mighty can fall sometimes.
Well, one of the things that bothered me about how this ended was the charges of racism on the charge of the prosecution, on the part of the prosecution, and that is when you do that, and it's disingenuous in my opinion, because one of the prosecutors on the case was a very, was an African American woman who made a very eloquent case for the plaintiff in this case.
And that's where he pointed a lot of his anger, was it not?
Well, he probably felt like, because it's like, I forget the brother name in O.J. Simpson deal who... but
Darden.
Yeah, a lot of people took him to task because he had the audacity to prosecute the Jews. But this African-American woman was very eloquent in saying that this plaintiff really was brave and courageous in coming forward and not giving up on this. And so they had an obligation to not give up on her. And Bill Cosby, as an African-American, I've been always proud of until these allegations came out because of what he did and being kind of a trendsetter.
She wasn't on there because she was black. She was on there because she was a woman.
Yeah.
And that's why she was prosecuting him.
And she was good.
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting otherwise.
No, but they were attacking her because she was an African American. But from a prosecutorial standpoint, the head prosecutor, the district attorney, I assure you that to me, the thought of her race was not the issue, but they're thinking we have to have a strong female on this team. That would be something that you'd be thinking about.
Yes, but I was just making a tangential point.
I get it. I get it.
Her being African American and the charges of racism to try to, whatever following that you still have with people. You're trying to throw them off with these charges, and I thought that was disingenuous on Cosby's
I've defended
part.
people for 30 years, and that is if you have to go down to the fact that you're prosecuting me because I'm black, you are going to prison.
Yeah,
That's all there is to it.
If that's your defense.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're black, you are going to prison.
Yeah, and it's not like they haven't been prosecuted because they were black. So,
as far as Cosby is concerned, the sheer number of women that he is, I'm not going to say alleged, that he assaulted is just amazing to me.
Stunning.
And I'm very glad that this happened, that this prosecution, first of all, that there was a case that hadn't,
within
in
the
which
statute.
the statute, limitations hadn't expired. But I'm so glad that this happened during this Me Too moment, because I think that a lot of celebrities get off based on their, celebrity, because there are people who will, just great memories of him, and there are people who just cannot imagine that Dr. Huxtable is a rapist, right? But he is. Now, I was so glad to see him go to prison, and he deserved to die in prison, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he probably will.
But then you have cases like Brock Turner, who was raping an unconscious woman behind a dumpster, and I think he got 3 months. And the judge talked about, he lost his scholarship to Stanford, so isn't that punishment enough? If Me Too does anything, I hope it brings attention to the serious nature of sexual assault, and that it's not just something that deserves a slap on the wrist.
But and I don't want to mitigate what happens to women or any sexual assault victim, because there's men who are sexual assault victims too, and I don't want to mitigate what happens to anybody.
You mean diminish
What happens to anybody? But I also don't want to see these prosecutions turned into cookie cutter prosecutions where everybody gets the same punishment just because they've been accused. And every case has to revolve around its own facts, and we need juries to pay attention to those facts and the facts of each case individually, and not get tied up into the political movement of the day. And a defendant deserves that right to a jury that is going to base their decisions on the facts of his case, not on the political movement and not on the fear and the anger of society. And it is so important that when I step into that courtroom, that the jury is basing their decision on the facts of this individual's case and the facts that are developed in that courtroom. It's very important. And we can't say that Bill Cosby deserved this punishment, but this other, what was his name?
Brock Turner.
Brock Turner's case was mishandled because he got probation. We don't know what it was that caused that judge in that case to say he deserved probation. We don't know that.
What I find really extraordinary in the Bill Cosby saga is Andy pointed out how many women were involved, and then you also look at the length of time that this went on.
Right.
And do you all recall, and I can't remember, and James, maybe you'll remember whether it was the 90s or how many, when Cosby went on that national tour to lecture to black people about how they should live their lives and improve their lives.
It was in the early 2000s, actually.
While he was doing it.
So exactly. How can you compartmentalize your life enough and be doing that and then be going around the country criticizing all your fellow
and that's my
African-Americans?
point. That's why he deserved prison, but we don't know why Brock Turner may not have. And look, I'm not mitigating. I don't know anything about Brock Turner's case. Okay, I wasn't there. But the point I'm trying to make is we can't say that everyone who's convicted of this deserves the same prison sentence.
But I did not say that. I said I hope that in this era, attention is brought to the seriousness of sexual assault, and so you don't get a judge on the stand saying, well, you have been convicted of this rape, but you did lose your scholarship to Stanford, and so that seems to me like punishment enough. That has nothing to do with everybody should get the same punishment or not. It is a mindset of people who are in courtrooms and are charged with prosecuting and are charged with sentencing, that they don't think that, well, your life has been disrupted.
And I'm not jumping down your throat. I'm just trying to make a point that sentencing is personal to the case.
Right.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Too, it took 2 trials of Bill Cosby to get the conviction. They had to change the rules in the second one in order to get the evidence in that led to his downfall.
His conviction. Right. And that's a good point. And that actually makes the point that Andy was making earlier.
I've had 2 today. I've had 2.
It makes the point that Andy was making, that celebrity has a lot to do with these things. And I've represented celebrities, and it is easier to defend a celebrity because people don't want to think they do anything wrong. And it's easier. It makes it easier for me. It does.
I really want to repeat that I'm talking about the attitude of people toward sexual assault, not the specific number of years in prison or any specific punishment. Let's, just like you said on a recent podcast, that there was a time when a perfectly legitimate defense for a person accused of rape was to tear down the victim and question what she was wearing and what she was doing there and how many sexual partners she had had. And that is no longer...
Right. That's no longer...
You cannot do that anymore. But there are other attitudes that need to change around the prosecution of sexual assault. So I don't want anyone to come away from this thinking that everybody should get life in prison if they rape somebody.
I'm not saying you said that, but I don't want, and I'm all in favor of the Me Too movement. I'm 100% behind it. I just don't want the attitude to be that if you're charged with this, you have to go to prison, because every case has to turn on the facts of that case. And if we haven't learned anything on what's been going on in the country, is that we can't diminish what the Constitution protects for everybody, period. And I'm not saying you don't.
I'm just so glad y'all are jumping on each other's asses this week. And
I'm not jumping on you. I'm not jumping on you. I'm just I don't want the tone to turn to something else. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, let's move on. All right.
I want the tone to turn to something else.
Well, let's turn it to something that everybody agrees on. The Kavanaugh Diaries, Part 2. If you didn't watch this, man, you were the only person in the country. A searing day of testimony. I missed. I'll never get that day back. I didn't get 1 billable minute in.
That's sad if you didn't bill 1 minute.
I don't think I billed 1 minute that day. I watched this thing from start to finish. My law partner kept coming in trying to talk to me. I was just get out, get out. I'm busy. This was watching Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and then watching Brett Kavanaugh was a stunning day to watch this. Two lives torn apart on live television left America facing more fundamental questions, I think, than whether Brett Kavanaugh should sit on the Supreme Court than after. At the end of the day, and we'll get into the end of the day after that, but let's talk about the hearing first, and then we'll talk about what happened. But I want to leave this opening with Lindsey Graham's meltdown, and then we'll talk about the whole process. But Lindsey Graham's meltdown, what do you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. I don't know, Lindsey, where do you think they got that idea, if that's the case? But I thought that what Lindsey Graham did was just an audition for the Attorney General position. I thought it was terrible. I thought the whole process was terrible, and I thought that it...
Actually, there's more to it than that. I didn't realize it, and I've always found it strange why Lindsey Graham, who was certainly no fan of Trump's during the 2016 general election, suddenly has become this big pal. And that was explained during the coverage that South Carolina is just, one of the strongest Trump lands in the nation. And you saw what happened to Mark Sanford, who just got defeated there after he criticized Donald Trump. And apparently there are some Republican members thinking about running in a primary against Lindsey Graham in 2 years. And so now he's just done a 180.
So he's now
supporting protecting Trump whenever he can. So that's what that's all about to those of you who didn't hear that. And now it might make a little bit more sense. But that was pathetic. That was one pathetic performance. But this whole thing, I went home and I posted on Facebook that before going to bed, people need to go outside their house or apartment and scream at the top of their lungs, "Withdraw Kavanaugh, withdraw Kavanaugh." And I said it will do absolutely no good, but it'll make you feel a lot better. And so I was just, kind of screwing around, and I don't post all that often. I think it's still going on. There have been hundreds of comments. People are just going at each other's throats, coming at me, bringing up, and then I was, pushing back on people. It was the most incredible thing that I've ever seen because people are just beside themselves on this and on both sides.
So just talk for a minute about Dr. Christine Blasey Ford versus her testimony versus Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, I thought they were different, and I thought the biggest difference was that hers was true. So there's that.
So before I talk about that, I have to do this Matt Damon Saturday Night Live skit last night. I'm going to go from 11:11 to 11:15 real quick. So, I watched that too, and it was, riveting. You just could not take your eyes off of it because you kept waiting for Dr. Ford's testimony to somehow, break down where they were going to ask her a question. And this woman that the Republicans hired for Maricopa County just kept throwing every fastball right down the middle of the plate, and she just kept knocking it out of the park. And to her credit, this woman was not prepared to cross-examine this witness anyway because she's usually on the other side, helping victims of sexual crimes.
But also, it really wasn't, I'm going to let you finish, but it really wasn't fair what they did to that prosecutor because they brought her in and they didn't tell her you have to do this in 5-minute increments, and we're going to let a Democrat come in and undo everything you did in between.
Yes, says the defense attorney.
That's true.
The prosecutor. But anyway.
Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. Well, she basically said that at some point.
Yeah.
She said, I'm not used to interviewing people in 5-minute increments. Yeah. When I sit down with a victim, I sit down with them once and twice and 3 times, and that's not something that she does. But I thought that Brett Kavanaugh did not show. So sitting on the editorial board of the Houston Chronicle, like Miss Georgeson over here, for many years, we had the opportunity to interview every judicial candidate for every position in the state of Texas. And we always look for judicial temperament. number one. And when Brett Kavanaugh came out with his opening speech and just went totally partisan, that right there shocked me because I've never seen a Supreme Court nominee do that, and somebody let the dogs out again.
I thought he went full Trump. That's what I said.
And so actually, you're absolutely right, because he was playing for an audience of one, because he had heard that Trump said that his Fox News interview was weak and he didn't come across as very strong. So he came out, fully partisan. And so any pretense that when a case comes before the Supreme Court where this man has to vote on a case that might be political, he is going to, it's no pretense about where he's going to land up, because he came out and essentially said this attack is Clinton-like, and he was talking to one side of the table. He was not talking to the Republicans. And then on top of that, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, John Cornyn all followed his lead. They basically fired Miss Mitchell on the spot, and said, forget about it. You could just shut up.
You're done, lady.
We're going to do our thing here. And so to me, this whole process was a sham, the same sham that Lindsey Graham pointed out.
Andy?
You made pretty much all the points. I think that the partisanship that Kavanaugh showed is disqualifying for the Supreme Court. Dr. Ford, her testimony was measured. She said when she didn't remember something, what she did remember was chilling and believable. When she said that the most indelible memory she has in her hippocampus is the laughter that.
Yeah, that was really riveting.
Yeah, and it's a detail that I think that any person who is honestly looking at the testimony, you had to believe that. You had to believe that you can't make up a detail like that. Now, I sort of thought that I watched the Anita Hill hearings, and I was appalled back then. That was a real eye-opener for me in my 20s. But somehow I thought that the people who were on that committee, like Orrin Hatch, had evolved over this span of time, and that they were probably ashamed
I think
of the way
hardened is a better term.
Well, it's amazing. They are not ashamed.
Yeah.
There's still on the Republican side of that committee only white men, just like was the case during the Anita Hill hearings. And the Republicans paid lip service to this idea that we want to treat Dr. Ford respectfully. We want to give her a fair hearing. We don't want to tear her down. They put this woman in place to question her, so they didn't have the optics of last time, a bunch of white males questioning this woman's veracity. And like I said last week, they couldn't hold it in. The incubus popped out, and they were just furious. They were just furious, and they. Okay, so the point I want to make is, not only do you have to kiss Donald Trump's ass these days, the Republicans feel like to get elected, they have to be more Trump than Trump. Now it seems like they have to talk like Donald Trump and be, just belligerent like Donald Trump. I don't think that's good for our democracy.
Let's break this down. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, she was wonderful in her testimony all morning long. And she was credible, she was believable, she was passionate. She cried where she was appropriate. I mean, it was really everything you would expect. Everything you would expect.
Yeah, I don't think she cried. I think her voice trembled.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, she showed emotion.
I don't mean she was blubbering. I mean,
right.
She was a perfect witness that you would expect. And they broke for lunch. And during the lunch break, the Fox News Channel commentators said, this is not looking good for Brett Kavanaugh. And the president saw that. And they came back from lunch, And that's when everything turned.
Yeah.
That's when the Republicans went on the attack. That's when Brett Kavanaugh went on the attack. I'm telling you, it turned because Fox News Channel said they are losing. I promise you.
I think that is a very believable theory
Yeah.
about what happened. Now, Kavanaugh's opening statement was insane. You know, the crying, oh, woe's me. Oh, you've destroyed my family. You've destroyed my life. I'll never be able to teach again. I'll never be able to coach again.
He destroyed his family. Do you mind if
go
jump
ahead.
in for a
Go
sec?
ahead, yeah.
Because this is what really angers me so greatly about all of this. When this broke, he knows the truth. We've had this discussion, and I know some have suggested maybe he doesn't know the truth. I think
Because
he
he
does
was
know the
blackout
truth.
drunk.
Tired of people talking about, so long ago. Things that happened in high school are seared in your head. They're seared in your memory if they were bad, and things that I could still recall some things that people said to me. And as somebody else pointed out, and I've graduated about the same time, a little before he did, this is what people would do. They'd go over to someone's house, and some people would come over. Sometimes a lot of people would come over. But I can't tell you all the houses that I was at. I can tell you the things that happened at those houses, but I couldn't take anyone there or locate that house.
And you could totally.
And one other thing is that what possible motivation
Absolutely.
could she have had
Right.
to go through this spectacle and this ordeal that she's had to go through? And so if Brett Kavanaugh wanted to put an end to it, he could have simply said, Mr. President, you need to withdraw my name and appoint somebody else. But he certainly wasn't going to do that.
Or if it's not true, he would have said, I'll take a polygraph and put the FBI on it. Let's do it. Let's get
and
it done.
he never would say that.
No, he would not say
Despite being
that.
asked over and
he
over
wouldn't say
again,
no.
and acting like he wanted to get.
I was
You
at
know what struck me?
Saturday. I was at the best university in Texas, which we all agree is Sam Houston State University, and I was asked several times about this while I was there, and somebody said to me, because they all know my political leanings and which is politically divergent to everybody else at my former university virtually. And they said, don't you think that Brett Kavanaugh is getting a raw deal here? And I said, and one guy said, can you account for everything you did in high school? And I said, well, I can't account for every moment of high school, but I can assure you that of all the things I did in high school and of all the times I got drunk, there's not one girl that I knew in high school that would accuse me of raping her. Not one.
Yeah,
And it's not because one hasn't come forward.
Yeah.
You know that there are no women out there.
I didn't act that way. I didn't do it. I drank too much. I did. That's fine. I was a young man, and we drank, and I drank too much at times. I never tried to rape anyone, and that's period. End of story. If the FBI wants to investigate Chris for rape, have at it.
Yeah. You make a good point. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I grew up with 4 sisters. I didn't have any brothers, so I grew up respecting women and making sure that I did the right things. Otherwise, they would gang up on me and kick my ass. But I watched Brett Kavanaugh, and the thing that struck me. It's this kind of entitlement attitude that he had.
I was about to bring that up.
And, he went to a prep school. He grew up, with this belongs to me, like this Supreme Court nomination, and this is my seat. But the thing that really struck me is how disrespectful he was to Senator Feinstein and Amy Klobuchar.
And
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. And he talked over every single Democrat. He gave these bizarre, roundabout, overly detailed answers to run down the clock on them. And one of the senators said, if you lie about small things, you lie about big things.
Right.
That's a jury charge. That if you find someone not credible in some little part of their testimony, you can find that the rest of it is not credible. And the things that he so obviously lied about, the boof is flatulence. No, it's not.
No, right.
It's
a shame that
Devil's Triangle.
They didn't know that.
the Devil's Triangle is not about a drinking game. The worst to me is the Renata alumnus. As soon as I read that in that on that yearbook page, I thought they are referring to having sex with some girl, and the fact that it was on, and I knew that there were other people who had put it on their page too. It was a group thing. She is one of the 65 women who signed the letter saying what a great guy he was. When she found out from a reporter that he had that on his senior page, she said that it was disgusting, and she didn't know that. And, she hoped that her daughters would never have to deal with anything like that. And yet, time and time and time again, Kavanaugh and committee members referred to the 65 women. And I kept waiting for one Democrat to say, well, don't you mean 64? Because she withdrew her name from the letter. They kept referring to evidence that had already been discredited, and they just repeated and repeated and repeated because repetition makes it true.
Yeah.
I thought it was a travesty.
But just let me make this one point. I think we all make great points, but the fact of the matter is, they're just running out the clock. He's going to be confirmed.
Well, let's talk about that.
Wait, the Democrats were running out the clock?
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
The Republicans are running out the clock.
They have no reason to.
This investigation is going to come back with nothing more than what they already know.
No, they're going to talk to Mark Judge.
Yeah, let's get to that. Let's get to that. So
he's already made a statement.
Before they got to the vote,
I think it makes a difference.
Before they got to the hearing vote, the ABA withdrew its endorsement of Judge Kavanaugh and said that the FBI needs to fully investigate these accusations. Alan Dershowitz, a big supporter of Donald Trump, and said on Fox, in a Fox News opinion piece, that the Judiciary Committee needs to vote this down until the FBI fully investigates these accusations. And that's a huge statement by Alan Dershowitz, who I don't have any respect for Alan Dershowitz.
Chris, I think the only thing they could ask for is an FBI investigation.
Hang on.
What I'm suggesting is that won't make a difference.
Hang on, you haven't let me finish yet. I'm trying to set something up here. You stop.
Okay, all right. Make your point, brother.
I'm trying to. Then Jeff Flake, on the day of the
Someone told James he wasn't talking enough on the show.
I wish they had and I hadn't have done that.
He's making up for it.
On the morning that they were going to vote this into the Senate, the committee was going to vote it into the Senate, and it was moving along. You were right, James. It was moving into the Senate, and it was going to get confirmed. Jeff Flake was really assaulted by two women on the elevator, and if you didn't see that video, it was moving.
I'm going to say he was confronted.
Well, that's fine.
He was not
That's
assaulted.
Look, I'm happy they did it. Okay, I didn't say that as a negative. But,
I know. But words have meaning.
It was
according to Mr. Campbell,
because it worked. And he was confronted. Fine, I'll use Andy's words. And they yelled at him and two sexual assault victims, and they forced him, those two on their own, forced him to change his mind. And he went into the committee after meeting with several members of the committee, both Democrats and Republicans, came out and said, I will vote to move this into the Senate, but I will only vote to confirm him if we have a 1-week pause so the FBI can investigate credible accusations against him. And that is the only reason that the FBI is investigating this today. Now, with that said, James, you just said that this is going to just pass. They're not going to find anything, going to pass it through. So let's talk about that for a minute. The president said when he ordered the FBI investigation that we had full authority to do it. I have found stories since then that Don McGahn is in charge of the FBI investigation, and he has limited the investigation and will not allow them to even do things such as investigate whether or not what his hours were at the grocery store he was working at the time.
Judge.
No, Kavanaugh.
Mark Judge was the one working the grocery store.
Where she said
where she saw him.
She said if we get that will help me hone in on this. And Don McGahn said the FBI cannot do that.
But they've already confirmed that he was working there during that time.
But she wanted
the media has.
She wanted the FBI to tell her what those times were. So anyway, that limitation is going to put a stain on this investigation the whole time.
Okay, so that might But remember, the FBI is also going to question Dr. Ford. And they're going to ask her questions like, who drove you home that night? And why didn't you say anything about this? And so when they come back with that information, those Republicans on that panel is going to raise that question and wonder, well, you said you didn't drive. You know, maybe the friend who said that she has no recollection of what happened drove her home. But, you know, here's an opportunity, Dr. Ford, to talk about this. Why didn't you? And so you have to remember this plays both ways in the court of public opinion, Chris.
I get it. No, I get it.
So even though we have this investigation that's going to happen, it has its limits. And what he comes back with may only conclude what we already know. And so Brett Kavanaugh, for all intents and purposes, is on the Supreme Court. That's why when I talked about this at the beginning, we know when he gets on the Supreme Court how this man thinks about things already. We know what his temperament is.
But you're also watching as the majority in the Senate and in the House could easily flip going into 2019 after the November election.
Okay, that's an upside.
And if it does, they're going to call for an investigation. And as we learned during the hearings, there is no statute of limitations for sexual assault in Maryland where this occurred.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, so they could go back and do a criminal investigation of Brett Kavanaugh. And I think what was also made pretty clear, someone committed perjury on Thursday.
Somebody did.
They can't both be telling the truth.
Now, let's look at this. I've got 3 points here that I think are important. 2 points here that I think are important. I just committed perjury myself, but I'm not sworn in. All right, 2 points here I think are important. Jeff Flake doing this, giving the Democrats what they've been asking for, the FBI investigation. Did he just give Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski the cover they needed to vote for him? I mean, they could. If James is right, this comes out with nothing. It's a big wash. Does that give them the cover to say, well, you know what? We had the investigation. I'm just gonna nominate him. I'm just gonna vote him through. If that happens, the Democrats' gamble was a bad gamble, wasn't it?
Well, it was a bad. I don't think asking for an FBI investigation is a bad gamble when that's the only card you have to play. But listen, the Mark Judge, he much was made of this letter that in which Mark Judge said that Brett Kavanaugh didn't do it. He wasn't in the room. That letter was signed by his lawyer, not by Mark Judge. Right. Okay, so I think that's really important. When the FBI questions him directly, he's going to be under oath, and then he will be at risk of perjury.
Well, he won't be under oath, but lying to a federal agent is a felony.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. So
right.
he's going to get he can't lie,
right?
Or he's not supposed to lie.
Right.
And now
lying to Congress.
But here
right.
Well, here's the thing. Okay. The scope of the investigation, the limited scope of the investigation is a problem. I don't think it's going to be legitimate if they don't question all the witnesses. And the New York Times has already found sources that say that key witnesses have not been contacted and that there is no plan to interview them. So, you know what? The Democrats are doing the best they can with what they have.
Right.
But the Republicans are saying, hey, we're doing an investigation right now. Here's the candidate. If you have a question for him, ask it now. But it was ridiculous. He was lying about the answers, and the witnesses weren't there. And it looks like in this FBI investigation, the witnesses will still not be heard from.
But the Republicans are making a false argument saying, here's the candidate, ask him whatever you want.
Absolutely.
But the Democrats said, give us a 1 week investigation by the FBI. They've got that. They cannot come back now, I think, and say we need more. I just don't think they can do that.
They can do whatever they could. Yeah, I guess they can, because they can say, why didn't you interview Miss Svetlik? Why didn't you interview these college classmates of his that have already made statements about his proclivities? If you're going to do a half-ass investigation, yes, you can come back after the fact and say this investigation was not thorough. It was meant to not find anything.
Don't they give the president the argument that it's never going to be enough? You asked for a week, I gave you a week, and that's not enough. When is it ever going to be enough?
Yeah, you're making the political argument, but
it is political.
The logical argument is that this is not a real thorough investigation. This is not really an attempt to get to the bottom of these charges if you don't interview all the people who have knowledge.
I'm 100% behind that. The president said it would be a fair investigation.
Yeah, and
it's not. I get that.
Yes, and he can come back and say they got their week, and Grassley can say, look, they got their week, they got what they wanted, and there's no reason to. Yes, but right, you're absolutely right. The fact of the matter is, if they don't interview everybody, the Democrats have every right to.
And they can campaign on that, and they should campaign on that. But I don't think they should start coming back now and saying we need 3 weeks. You asked for a week, you got a week. You should then campaign on the fact that you then lied about the scope of the investigation.
There is no harm in the Democrats fighting and fighting and fighting some more in order to get the right result with this Kavanaugh nomination.
Well,
there is no downside to the Democrats
Chris,
fighting against this.
All right, let's talk about, we got to wrap this up, but I want to talk about a few key senators. Susan Collins, the Maine Republican, even before the sexual assault allegations were made public, was seen as a potential no vote on Kavanaugh. Her career could be at risk because of she is in a state that is almost the most supportive of abortion rights in the country, only behind New Hampshire and Vermont poll higher on abortion rights in the United States. And so really before Kavanaugh came up, before these allegations came up, she was almost a no vote anyway. So this really gives her cover to vote no anyway.
I think so. And I haven't heard about Joe Manchin, where he is now. I would think he would have the cover he needs as well, but I'm not sure. And then Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah, that's where I was getting to. Lisa Murkowski is also seen as a swing vote because not on the abortion issue, but the Alaskan natives, who make up 14% of her constituency, has told her if she votes yes on Kavanaugh, they are cutting her off. Instead, they're going to vote her out next time. And so she's got a lot of pressure on her. Joe Manchin, you just brought up 43%. He won. Manchin State voted for Trump by 43% margin in 2016, and Trump is headed there next Saturday for a campaign rally. He's in trouble
again. He's headed there again because he's
been
there a bunch of time, and yes, Joe Manchin is one of the Democratic senators that's in trouble.
But I've heard he's not in real trouble. He's likely to win.
But back to Susan Collins, she's not been a very forthful, thoughtful voice in this situation. She's raised some questions, but she's not raised.
Well, she's not on the Judiciary Committee, so it hadn't come time for her yet.
I understand that, but that doesn't stop her from questioning
public statements about it.
Making statements about it. And I mean, she's a female senator who can make these statements if she wants. I
think any woman who votes in favor of Kavanaugh is betraying women. Well, if they need something to cover their ass, well, they've got it. But be that as it may, they know that this woman is telling the truth and that there are too many questions about Brett Kavanaugh, and they need to vote no.
Well, Jeff,
I just have one question that I'd like to throw out and see what you all think. Now that we've had this hearing, do you believe that any time we have someone nominated for the Supreme Court going forward, will they all have to be asked whether they've ground their genitals on somebody?
I hope not.
Will that be a standard part of the question?
Well,
I think most men are not rapists, and so they don't need to be asked that question.
Well, they presented Brett Kavanaugh as this choir boy who's the perfect candidate.
He presented himself as a choir boy.
Yeah, but they also did that too. They presented him as, this is our guy, and we want him to win this nomination. And it turns out that he wasn't so much a choir boy as they thought he was. So,
Well, when this is over, this is going to go to vote in the Senate, and there's going to be two senators to watch, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, and they are going to hold the key, and that's why you haven't heard much from either one of them.
well,
they are holding.
I think
they
Jeff
are.
Flake is
Jeff Flake's going to vote. Jeff Flake's going to vote. He already said he's going to vote to confirm. It's going to take a lot.
Even
to
after
get,
No,
that
I think
confrontation,
he's going through a process. He's the one person on the Republican side who had a thoughtful statement about it, used the word doubt in his statement. He said, I'll just take 1 minute, and if go back and watch that part. He did not say how sorry he was that Kavanaugh was going through this process or any of that other stuff that these guys were saying. He said, I don't remember exactly, but he said, let's be thoughtful about this because doubts have been raised. And I think that he talked about having a sleepless night.
But this
not during the committee hearing. He is wrestling with his conscience.
But sadly,
I do not think that he is an automatic yes.
Sadly, I'm afraid that this is not about whether or not they think he's the right candidate for the Supreme Court. I think it's about whether or not they can win their next election.
Some
what they're
people
looking at.
have
And Jeff Flake
consciences.
wants to run against Donald Trump, and he's wrestling with that. And I wish it wasn't that. And I wish that this was about the greater good for the country, but I think it's about whether or not Susan Collins is going to get kicked out of her office in Maine and Lisa Murkowski is going to get kicked out of Alaska.
But I thought Cruz's comment was awfully strange when he said the most difficult thing for him was having to watch Brett Kavanaugh's mother. And I know that she obviously has had many facelifts, and she is difficult to look at, but I didn't think he needed to say that on national television.
Let's move into out of left field. With that, I think we'll move right into out of left field. You know what? I think I'll just go first.
Well, you just go ahead and go.
With that comment, I think I'll just head right into first. I watched those hearings last week with disgust. I spent my entire life, my formative life, wanting to do two things. I wanted to be a lawyer, which I did, and I wanted to run for public office. And when it became time for me to run for public office, being a public servant had become a contact sport, and I didn't want to put my family through it. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And watching what happened last week with the Brett Kavanaugh hearing solidified for me everything that I feared our country had become. Nothing. I just can't stand it. I can't stand to watch that we would break down people and break them down this way. What happened to Dr. Ford and what happened to Brett Kavanaugh is the worst we have to offer in the United States. And it's the worst that we have to offer by the United States Senate, that we would take these people and do what we did to them for political gain on either side, both the Democrats and the Republicans. In this case, mostly the Republicans. But whoever leaked that letter and didn't do the right thing with it is wrong. And it's wrong on all fronts. We've lost our way. We've lost our way with respect to how we treat people and with how we treat our Constitution. And we need to find our way again. And I'm sick of it. That's my out of left field.
That was pretty good, Chris.
You think it was wrong to leak the letter?
I do.
So I know Bill Cosby, being the icon that he was, has gotten many letters even before he has had 1 week in jail from his various fans and supporters and people who say they are praying for him or wishing him well. So here's a letter from a former fan who is basically reaching out to you to say, Dr. Cosby, my former idol, the one thing that you haven't done in all of this, and even if after your conviction, is say that I'm sorry for what I put those women through. Your legacy is on the line. And, you know, I could die tomorrow, but you're 81 years old, and you probably are not going to ever get out of prison, and you have nothing to lose in saying, I'm sorry for what I put those women through, and that would help your legacy immensely. say, I'm sorry, Bill Cosby, to those women that you put through hell for many years and never apologize for what you did?
My out of left field is just a thought that I had. It's really amazing to me how many times people have asked, well, why didn't she come forward? Why didn't she say anything? Rape is something that I know in a teenage girl's mind, the worst possible thing that could ever happen to you. And the shame always falls on the victim. And not the rapist, and it's hard. And even in this moment, when we're so free about sex in every aspect of our lives, women don't ask each other, "Hey, have you ever been sexually assaulted?" And we don't ask each other, and this has nothing to do with sex. "Hey, have you ever had an abortion?" I mean, that is not something that women talk about, even amongst ourselves. And I think that it's because of the deep level of shame that we've been conditioned to feel about those two issues. So please stop asking women, why didn't you come forward?
Couple of things as we leave you today. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to the Texas Tribune for the 2018 Trib Fest that three of us just got back from today. It was an incredible event, very informative, and a heck of a lot of fun. And I would strongly encourage others to take part when it comes around next year. My thanks for James Campbell for getting me the pass that I could use and go this year. My first time, and I loved it. Secondly, follow us on Twitter. We ask you every week. It's What's Left America, hashtag What's Left America. And also, I'm looking for more followers on Twitter, and mine is hashtag Chris Bell Lawyer, if you'd like to follow me. And these are the kinds of things that you're missing out on if you're not following me. Very proud of this. I had more likes and more retweets than almost anything I've ever put up. And what I said on Thursday was, keeping a, quote, calendar, end quote, in high school should be disqualifying in and of itself. Only Cruz would admire such buffoonery. I graduated around the same time, and I knew no one with a calendar. Most likely, if it existed, there would be no entry for got shit-faced or engaged in sexual assault. Those aren't the kinds of things people note on calendars, and it's ridiculous. I thought it was hilarious that the Saturday Night Lives get referred to them as his creepy calendars. Plenty creepy. The whole thing was creepy.
That's it for today. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. But more important, what we really need you to do is subscribe to What's Left America. It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. That's all the time we have this week right here on What's Left America.